Hello, everyone. Happy Father's Day. I hope you all had a wonderful day. Whether you're watching this now or whether you're watching this later, it is June 21st, so summer has officially started. My name is Erica, and I'm Bernardo LaPala's oldest grandchild, and today I'm just going to be covering some memories and some highlights of the conclusion of Bernardo LaPala's New York City book tour in June of 2013. So this has been a walk down memory lane, and it's been a lot of fun for me. It's helped revive my memories about a lot of different things, and I hope that you've gotten a kick out of it. If you have been watching on YouTube, I really want to ask you to like, share, comment, and subscribe, because I want to get to 4,000 subscribers over on YouTube, because this will allow me to have a members only area where I can kind of talk about things that I won't normally talk about just on the public channel. And it's also a means of support. It's a way of support for me, because there's so many things that I want to do, but I need support to do it. So that's my request. Okay, so now let's get into it. So June 6th, which was a Thursday in 2013, was the day, or the evening of the day, that was designated for this amazing birthday bash party that was going to be held, or I should say was held, at a place called the Slipper Room. The Slipper Room was a vaudevillian-style theater down on Manhattan's Lower East Side. Specifically, it was on Orchard Street, and the address was 167 Orchard Street. So we had secured the venue for a start time, let's say when the doors were open at 7:30 p.m., which would allow people to come in and take their seats and get comfortable, and then the show was actually to start at 8 p.m. So most people at this point, what to speak of an 111-year-old author who'd already had quite the week in New York City, would have been satisfied just to relax and chill out and hang out in their hotel room before the 112th birthday bash. But that wasn't Bernardo. That wasn't Bernardo's style. He was very, very, very active and very curious and always interested in learning new things. And as I found out, he wanted to go to Harlem on Thursday, June 6th. So the reason why he wanted to go to Harlem was there's a library there. Specifically, there is a library called the Schomburg Library for Research in Black Culture, which was established by an Arturo Schomburg. And it's still there. I believe it's on the corner of 125th Street in Harlem. He wanted to go because there was a particular entertainer that he wanted to learn more about, that he wanted to research. Now, the name of this entertainer, or how she was known as Black Patti. Patti being spelled P-A-T-T-I. And Bernardo had been a fan of Black Patti since he was 14 years old. At least he told me that's when he became aware of her, which would have been the year 1915. So apparently, Miss Black Patti was a superstar of her day. She was born in 1868. She died in 1933. And she attracted mixed audiences all across the country. So when you think about this time frame, coming out of, shortly coming out of slavery, and then, a small period there of relative freedom, I guess you could say, amongst peoples, and then slowly, the advent of Jim Crow coming in. This was a really big deal. Apparently, she was a trained opera singer. But because of the racism and bigotry of the time, she fulfill couldn't fulfill that dream of being an opera singer, at least not in this country. This is my understanding. So she didn't let that stop her. Frequently, apparently, she would be the sole black performer in different theatrical companies across the country. And there was a show, apparently, that she was starring in on Broadway, the Great Right Way, right here in New York City, where I guess she was letting all of her, vocal talents be displayed because it was her show, as far as I understand it. She conceptualized it and she was starring in it. And I'm not certain, because I just didn't ask, but I'm going to think that perhaps Fernando had an opportunity to go see this show, or perhaps he had just read about her in the newspaper. But in whatever manner, in the end, she came into his awareness. He was a fan. He was a fanboy. And so here he was at the age of 111, on the eve, as it were, of him turning 112, on the day of his 112th birthday celebration in New York City, because he was going to fly out the next day to go back to his home state in Arizona. But of course we wanted to celebrate his birthday while he was here. Determined to go to Harlem to do research on this performer. My grandfather was a great lover of the arts. He loved musicians, he loved entertainers, and his own daughter, my mother, Lee Chamberlain, was a great performer and entertainer and actress. We found our way up to Harlem, but prior to going to the library, he wanted to do a little walk around. He wanted to do a little kind of a walk down memory lane, walking around his old neighborhood in Harlem. So I said, okay, well, I think the best thing to do is we do that first. Then we make our way, over to the library. And then after that, we can either take a cab or get on the subway and make it back down to the Sanctuary guest suites, where we can get changed for your birthday bash before we make it over, have a little something to eat, relax a little bit, and then go over to your birthday party. So that was the plan, and that's what we did. So before I talk about further about him going into the library, when we got up to Harlem, I believe we got off around 135th Street. And we walked around there because at one time he didn't live too far away from that spot. I've posted here previously a photograph of the apartment building that he used to live in with his family. Shout out to Rosetta Hargrove, who supplied me with a photo. So I will research and go through all the photos that have been posted here and try and post that for you again. So we also walked by, the very famous Baptist church up in Harlem. And then we just kind of walked around the neighborhood, and he was sort of remembering different things and sort of thinking out loud. And I recall that there was a certain stretch of blocks that we were walking down where there were some, in my mind, some sort of very tall, majestic looking apartment buildings that were there. And Bernardo was looking up at the apartment buildings, and he said, wow, he said, I don't remember any of these buildings. They're all new. These must be new buildings, he said. So, to put that in context, when Bernardo ended up moving out of his conjugal apartment, he did end up moving to sort of a more modern type building in Harlem. But that being as it may, if he moved out of the neighborhood around that time, and then he met Georgette, and then they ended up finding an apartment and living in Queens together, which they lived at 72-10 41st Avenue for many, 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 many years. That would mean that these buildings, I suppose, had been built subsequently after he had moved out of the neighborhood, and for him, they were new. But these apartment buildings are somewhere between, they've already been erected somewhere like, 60, 70 years, right? Giving some leeway here for the date. I immediately thought of that story about Rip Van Winkle, where Rip Van Winkle, goes to sleep, and when he wakes up, it's about 100 years later. I think that's how the story goes. And of course, when he goes to find, the people that he knew, they're gone, and the place where he used to live is completely transformed and unrecognizable. So as Bernardo, was walking, and we were walking around and looking at different things, he said, wow, I can remember different people who used to call my name. He knew everyone. And everyone knew Bernardo. My grandfather was extremely personable. He had a wonderful smile. He had a very friendly demeanor. He was a happy guy. He was also extremely well dressed all the time, and he knew everyone. So he said, when I used to walk down the street, I would hear people calling my name. Of course, people would call his nickname. His nickname was Q, which was short for Cuba. So, as he was walking around his neighborhood, let's say to go to work in the morning, people go, hey Q, hello Q, hey Cuba, hello, 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 hello. So that just really is something, when you think about it, that someone who's 111 years old has these very fresh memories of what it was like to walk around their own neighborhood and hear so many friendly voices. He said, I can hear them now. He says, I can still hear them calling my name. I thought that was amazing. There was something about being with Grandpa or being with Bernardo when he would have a recollection and he would have a story about something that I instantly felt that I was right there with him. It was an amazing ability he had. He was an incredible storyteller. So now we arrive at the Schomburg Center, the New York Public Library. And we go in and we, basically ask for direction, from the staff, from the librarian. They always have someone at the front desk to help him find, what he's looking for. And so I say, okay, Grandpa, listen, I'm just going to stay down here because, he's a perfectly capable man. He's perfectly capable of looking through the stacks. He's perfectly capable of finding this book, that he's looking for, a reference to this book, because as I understood, he wanted to order it once he got home. And so he did that. As I recall, I must have been sitting in the little waiting area they had. I was sitting there for, I would say a solid half hour, but I was also preparing for the evening in my notes and making sure that, everything was, on point, and that I had a grip of everything that was going to go on that evening. So eventually, Bernardo did return to the lobby, and I said, did you find what you're looking for? Yes, I found what I was looking for, and, I'm going to order it when I get home. And I was like, great. And just as we were preparing to exit the building, there was a woman that came who was on the library staff, who had a very excitedly, big smile on her face, very nice woman, and said, excuse me, but the head of the library wants to know if he can come and meet you. So in other words, somehow or another, I don't know how, because I wasn't upstairs, but somehow or another, word had gotten around the library that the Bernardo Apollo was in the library, and someone told the head of the library that he was here, and she wanted to know, could he come downstairs and meet Bernardo? And we said, I'm sorry, but we can't stay any longer. We have to leave immediately because we have a birthday party to attend, and if we don't leave now, we're going to be late. And so we said, well, another time we would love to meet the librarian. We're very sorry, but we can't stay right now. Little did I know at the time that that would be the last time that Bernardo would ever be in New York City. And so never got to meet the librarian. That's something I regret, actually. But the reality is that we were pressed for time, because as I recall, we were up there and it was like 5:30. It was approaching 5:30. And so we were kind of cutting it a little thin, because again, the doors for the birthday bash were at 7:30, and of course it's his birthday, so we got to be there a little bit ahead of time and take our seats and be there. So we walked out, we hailed a cab, we got in the cab, and we made our way back down to the sanctuary and guest suites and prepared ourselves for the evening ahead. So now, one of the pleasantries or surprises of the evening was born out of a communication that I had received from a very nice man who resided in Maryland. First name was Jason, who very much wanted to meet Bernardo. He was hell-bent on meeting Bernardo. I told him about the birthday bash and celebration. Jason was a very busy man. He was a family man, and he was running his own business. And he was going to drive, all the way from Maryland all the way up to New York City, which, it's kind of a long drive. So sure enough, he arrived. He made contact. He was very excited. And as a birthday gift for Bernardo, he offered to pick us up in the hotel in a car, in a special car. It was like a limousine. So Bernardo could arrive in style, at the event. Now, Jason was actually driving the car, and it was a very, very nice car. It was kind of like, on the level of like a Mercedes. So, the leather seats and, extreme comfort and the sunroof and the air conditioning and all of that. And so, sure enough, he arrived at the appointed time, picked us up. I got in the car in the front seat. Bernardo got in the car in the back seat, like the king that he was. And we drove over to the slipper room, and he let us out, and we went in, and I believe he parked the car, and then, joined for the evening's festivities. Now, mind you, where we were staying on Stanton Street was really not that far from the slipper room. Everything was really in close proximity, but it was just such a wonderful gesture and so sweet of him. So thank you for that all these years later, Jason. So once we got into the venue, of course, Bernardo still had a cache of books that he was going to sign for the evening. And once again, it was his first book, Age Less, Live More, Achieving Health and Vitality at 107 Years and Beyond. Because as I've stated previously, if you've been following along with this series, his book, Beyond 100, How to Live Well into Your Second Century, was going to be released on August 17th on Apple Books as an e-book. So it was not available in print at that time. Print would come later. So we had that, for fans and that were very excited about being there. So the other, let me talk about who the performers were for this amazing event. The performers and the people that I'm going to name are actually very well known in New York amongst a certain crowd and circuit of people at the time, because in New York City there is a vintage crowd, and what we mean by that is there are aficionados of the style of dress and the taste in music and the taste, in dance and entertainment of this time period. And we're talking about, the 1920s, the 1930s, right? That period. And so the Champagne Riot was the production company, right? The forward-facing arm that would present these burlesque performers and these wonderful bands like Gelber and Manning. Gelber and Manning are, or were, a husband and wife team. They're still married, but they used to perform together. And Jesse Gelber, what a wonderful piano player. I mean, he knew all the hits of the teens and the 20s and the 30s. Just a virtuoso piano player. Very entertaining, really into the music. And his wife, Miss Manning, happened to specialize in the music of this time period, singing songs like You'd Be Surprised, Along a Lazy River. But they are so talented, these two. They weren't sort of playing at that time period. They were really fully immersed in it and giving a wonderful performance. The other people that were on the bill, and if you're on this page here on Facebook, you'll see that I shared the poster of that evening that's got a beautiful picture of Bernardo from when he was a young man in his 20s on the poster. And so you'll see that Jen Minsky is on there. So Jen Minsky is a wonderful burlesque performer. She tap dances. Her costumes are always fabulous. She brings a lot of joy, to the genre. And, she's a real burlesque performer. So if any of you have been to a burlesque show, you know that involves some very artful stripping. And then, the performer will get down to a costume that is not complete nudity, of course, but that is very glamorous, let's say. Very sexy. So that was, a lot of the 20s and the 30s. The Roaring 20s was called the Roaring 20s for a reason, because after the First World War, people really cut loose, and they definitely cut loose in entertainment. So that when you think about flappers and all of that, that's that time period, and vaudeville and all these, art forms that were, bursting on the American entertainment scene. And, this went on for a while, and actually, burlesque, it's never really died. The 40s, the 50s, so many stars, and that tradition is still being carried on today, and Jen Minsky is one of those people. Another person that was on the bill was a burlesque performer, and her name was Jezebel Express, and she was basically doing a fan dance. So she did a smashing performance. Another person on the bill, her stage name was Evelyn Vinyl, and wow, what a performer she was. I mean, she kind of reminded me of almost kind of like an Eartha Kitt. She was, kind of exotic, as it were, and had this very beautiful, long, classy skirt on, and came out and did just a wonderful dance. Wow, that was fantastic. And even though on the poster it says Ekaterina, as fate would have it, Ekaterina, something happened that night and she was not able to perform. And so there was a wonderful aerialist and acrobat named Kay Burke, who stepped in and took her place. And when I step in, what I really mean is she swung in by arriving from the ceiling of the venue, using it's a technique that aerialists will use where they'll use, like, fabric to climb up and lower themselves down onto the stage. And Kay was expert at that because this woman literally ran away to join the circus when she was of age. And she started, she and another woman started a great venue called House of Yes. But before that, they had another troupe of, I'm trying to remember the name of it. They had another troupe that were basically professional acrobats and people who knew how to dance on point. So they were like ballerinas. I think it was called Lady Circus. Lady Circus, I'm pretty sure that's what it was called. And they performed at all the very high-end performance venues here in New York City. So that's how the evening started, with Dandy Wellington. I don't know if you can see here. Dandy Wellington, that's wearing the top hat here. He was the MC for the evening. So, of course, his name was a play, sort of a play on words and history of the dandyism of the black man, very well dressed, and also Duke Ellington, who, my grandfather liked Duke Ellington. Of course, he also liked Count Basie. I think Count Basie was his favorite. But so he was the master of ceremonies for the evening, and he was introducing all the acts and wishing Bernardo a happy birthday, and then ultimately calling Bernardo up on stage and me up on stage, where I ended up singing a little tune to Bernardo and kind of leading everyone in a happy birthday song at the end of it. So what a way to open the show. She was wearing a gorgeous sequined, off-white bodysuit. I remember it had like little kind of rhinestones on it so it glittered, and this beautiful kind of little headpiece. I believe it had a little feather in it. And down she came. I mean, it was amazing. Now, the other thing that I want to say about the evening, which I found to be amusing, was our friend Pat, who had been so instrumental in getting Bernardo to the Yankees game. So she was sitting in the front row, and she was sitting in the front row with her friend Sherry and Sherry Rogowski, and of course I was there and all of that. And when she saw these burlesque artists coming out, I remember she kind of kept looking over. She kind of kept looking over at Bernardo with this kind of concerned expression on her face, because I think that she was worried that this would be too shocking for him, not realizing, of course, that, let's say in 1924, Bernardo was already 23 years old, right? He was already a man about town. As a matter of fact, Bernardo told me that there was this venue that he used to go to that was called the Bandbox. And the Bandbox had a floor show, and it was known for the beauty and the allure of the showgirls that used to work there. And he told me, in fact, that the way the club was set up, it wasn't a very big club, but the way the club was set up was the showgirls' dressing room was literally above the bar, right? Very clever marketing. So that means that all the gentlemen that were at the bar ordering drinks could literally see all the showgirls walking up and down the staircase into their dressing room before their floor show and after the floor show, which of course I'm sure really increased bar sales. So at any rate, it was just kind of amusing to me, these different perceptions that people had of Bernardo, that he was feeble, weak, couldn't walk, couldn't talk, couldn't dress himself, couldn't bathe himself. His memory must be not that great, or in this instance, I guess something more, relatable in terms of entertainment, but Pat needn't have worried. So the other thing that he really enjoyed was listening to the other band, that was present there. So I remember it was Michael Hashem. Michael Hashem is a fabulous a player. He plays, I think it's a clarinet. Anyway, he's like a virtuoso. He's wonderful. And he performs all around New York City and loves performing at these vintage places. But I even saw him perform one time with a whole orchestra up around Columbia. And if I'm not mistaken, if memory serves, I believe they were presenting some of the works of Duke Ellington. So he and the band and the formation, the man that he had on the piano and the drums, they were absolutely fabulous. And I remember Bernardo turning to me and saying about Jesse Gelber's playing, Gelber and Manning, saying, ooh, that he really knows how to play. That boy really knows how to play music. And I was like, yeah, he does. So there you go. You had basically a very pleased rave review from a 111-year-old author, man, who grew up in Harlem during the early days, right? Through the teens, through the 20s, through the 30s, living there in the 30s and the 40s, who lived through all these periods, giving Jesse Gelber a compliment, a real compliment, someone who had, lived through and seen the real thing in that way. So it was a wonderful evening. Another part of the evening was, and I have to give Lee Chappell a shout out for this, was that I wanted to present Bernardo with a birthday cake. But that was going to be a challenge. It was going to be a challenge bringing a birthday cake into that venue and then cutting it and then plates and then cleaning up and all of that. It was going to be complicated. So instead of doing that, Lee Chappell offered to bake cupcakes. I'm trying to think of how many cupcakes he must have baked at this point. I'm trying to remember how many people were there for this event. I'm going to lowball it and say there were 50 people at this event. It was an intimate venue. Maybe there were 70. Maybe there were slightly more. I remember it was definitely packed. It was definitely packed. It was a full house. But the style of seating was more old-fashioned in that you had little tables and then you'd have, 2 or 3 chairs around each table and then it would go back. There might have been smaller balconies. I'll have to look and I'll have to look up and see if I can find a floor plan of the slipper room. But at any rate, this was a wonderful idea because after going up on stage with Josefa and having Bernardo stand there and sing happy birthday to him and the whole room singing happy birthday to him, it was wonderful just be able to hand out birthday cupcakes to all the attendees to enjoy. And I remember that the cupcakes, they believe we did vanilla cupcakes, but the frosting, it was done so beautifully and so artfully that it kind of had like a little shine, a little glitter to it. And I remember the glitter, somehow the cupcake matched Kay Burke's costume. So I don't know if they talked about that beforehand or if it was just one of those wonderful synchronicities. But, between the white of her costume, our aerialist, the white of the suit that Bernardo was wearing, and the white of the cupcakes, it just turned out perfectly. So, again, after that, there was a little book signing and a little opportunity to purchase a book if they wanted to for $20. And I seem to remember everything being done about 11:30. So, at the conclusion of the evening, we went back to the hotel. It was pretty late in the evening for Bernardo standards, but what a ball we had. It was such a high note, and it was so inspiring for everyone, and it was so nice for him to see how he was appreciated and how he was loved. Because, you know, when you do something where you're essentially teaching people for years and years and years and years, you don't know always if it's having an effect on them or not. He would often express disappointment that even though people would ask him what his secrets were to his health and longevity, that 99% of the people he met wouldn't change their habits or wouldn't do anything about it. And it was heartbreaking for him. He used to say, you know, if you even do one of the things that I'm suggesting that you do on a daily basis, you will start to see a change in your life, which of course will inspire you to take other steps, right? So it's not that we have to try and scale the whole mountain at the same time, but we have to start, and we have to start with one thing, even if it seems to be a small thing, and be consistent with it. And that is always going to change as we get older. You know, myself right now, you know, my challenge for myself this summer is that at the age of 63, as you get older, you know, your muscles do not stay firm and toned as they are when you're younger. When you're younger, you know, you just take it for granted. You don't even think about it. You know, your 20s, your 30s, you know, even your 40s, things are pretty much firm and things are pretty much in place. But then once you hit your mid-40s, your 50s, your 60s, then all that starts to change. And so I was thinking about my own fitness the other day, and I thought, you know, I want to tone my arms, and I want to tone my legs, and I want to, you know, tone up my core, because I know instinctively and I know intuitively that in my 63rd year, this is the time to do it. Because if I wait any longer, it's not going to be good. It's just not going to be good. It doesn't mean that, sure, you know, I could start later at 64 or 65, but why? I would rather set the foundation and set the good habits now for my exercise routine, you know, from here on out, just by doing something small or doing something a few days a week, and then eventually building momentum and it just turning into a routine, just the way I brush my teeth and wash my face. So instead of thinking, oh, I have to do everything all at once, I'm just going to do, you know, a bite-sized thing and be consistent with that and keep it up and build up my strength and build up my core. And in so doing, you know, build my immunity, and then, you know, be really in the shape that I want to be in once I hit 70, you know, once I hit 70 and 75. So my grandfather, of course, set a great example about this, because he would always exercise. He had an exercise bike. He had a kind of like also like a little mini bike. He had his weights. He had all these things. And even when he was staying in New York for that week, he would go outside and he would take a walk. You know, he would walk around the block and take a walk and make sure he got his exercise in. So I hope you find that encouraging. So to conclude here, the next day was Bernardo's departure on the flight leaving Newark Airport to go back to his adopted state of Arizona, to head back to his you know, apartment in Mesa. And I believe the flight was supposed to leave at, was it 10:35 in the morning? I believe it was supposed to leave at 10:35 a.m. in the morning. So that meant, it being a Newark airport and him being in Manhattan, he just wanted to have a good start, because of course, you know, they want you at the airport 2 hours ahead of time. So I wanted to make sure that Bernardo was at the airport, you know, by like 8:35 a.m. He also he didn't like to be late. And the other thing I did was, in this case, I did request a wheelchair for him, because I just thought, man, you know, if he can get a little VIP TLC treatment on the way out of here, why not? Because what a week we've had. I mean, just to recap the week, he arrives on Friday, May 31st. The next day, we were at Yankee Stadium, and we're there all day, and he's walking around getting the tour, and we're going through the baseball game and all of that. What the excitement of it all. The next day is a little bit of a downtime day. However, he's reading through the newspaper, and we're still going through our routine, his routine of eating at appointed times. And also I remember us having green tea and eating bananas together in the evening, since that was his routine before going to bed. Then, the next day, on Monday, we were off to the races, as it were. He was doing 2 appearances because we had the radio show to do in the morning, under the aegis of the Double Diamond Wellness Hour, and then we had the in-person gathering, to do in Brooklyn with Gafunya Ife. That was, another long lecture, and then books if people wanted it, and another kind of a mini birthday party. And then the following day, there was his own ticketed event and lecture that he was doing in the Sanctuary Guest Suites, with a little juice tasting prior to that. And then, the next day, there was the night out in Harlem, where we went to Dino's Barbecue to hear the Harlem Renaissance Orchestra, thanks to Gordon Polotnik, who ran Big Apple Jazz. And then at the end of that, there was a little conversation kind of interview that Kurt Ritta came to film with Gordon, sort of asking different questions about Bernardo's growing up in Harlem and the kind of music that he had listened to and all of that, right? Going home after that, and then, the next day, going up to Harlem to go to the library to do research on his favorite singer, or one of his favorite entertainers, I should say, Black Patty, and then the birthday party. I mean, wow. All at age 111. Incredible. And the book signings and all the interactions with all the people, and just getting around town, taking the subway, taking the taxis, getting picked up in cars, going to the airport, arriving from the airport. Then there were sort of side things that we would do that I didn't mention before. One day we actually stopped by just to say a quick hello to John Halpern, who was going to hand off some footage, on a DVD, I think, of the evening. Then there was the interviews that he had actually done when he was out at Yankee Stadium, right, with Ken Rosenthal, who reports on baseball on Fox News. And then there was own interviewer Gary on Yes Network. So, my goodness. So, yes, I wanted to make sure that he went to Newark Airport in comfort, that he wasn't going to have to stand around in one of those long lines, because if someone is a wheelchair and if someone is elderly, they will give them priority and allow them to board the airplane first. So that's what I wanted to happen. So that's what happened. So my grandfather's sort of closing question to me at the end of this amazing week was, well, what are you going to do now? I said, Grandpa, I don't think I'm going to be able to top the week that we just had together. I mean, this was really, I have to say, personally, it was really one of the best weeks of my life. I know that it was a really wonderful week for Bernardo, that it tickled him, and I was so happy to be able to send him home with multiple copies of the news, with him meeting and shaking hands with the captain, Derek Jeter, for him being able to meet, Rivera, Girardi, all the players at batting practice on Yankee Stadium, and just sort of bask in all of that before the next round of his birthday celebrations in Arizona, when he would officially turn 112 on August 17th of 2013. Okay, so If there's any questions, I don't see any questions typed down here right now. That's okay. If you want to make a comment or leave a question here, please do so, and I will respond to them accordingly. So I thank you very much for being here. It's really been a blast doing this. If there's anything else that you would like to hear about that you haven't already found on the YouTube channel, please let me know. Once again, shout out to all the fathers. Happy Father's Day. Your protection, your wisdom, your support is so important to your family and your community, more than you can ever know. I think that all the people that Bernardo was able to gather around him and the way that he is still doing today is a testament, because for a lot of people he was a father that they never had. My relationship to him, he was actually my grandfather, but my relationship to Bernardo was closer than the one that I had with my own father. And because of that, and because I wanted to be like him, and I just sort of drank him in, look at me now. Look at what an impact he's had on me now. That I'm here at 63 years old, looking good, feeling good, and making plans for the future. Bernardo always used to say, I'm making plans to live. I know I gotta die sometime. So, with that, remember to keep your liver and your colon clean, drop a comment below, and until next time, be well.